Good morning from the Asia Pacific. It's 9 a.m. in Beijing, where Chinese Premier Li Qiang is about to deliver his work report to the National People's Congress. You are watching the China Show. Welcome to the program. I'm David Ingles with Rebecca Choong Wilkins. A quick glance across this market action as we await, of course, the Premier, who is set to outline, of course, a lot of the details that we already know. Some context certainly will be key there as you look at market reaction going into the Wednesday session. Broadly speaking, one of rather risk aversion out there, although we are coming off lows a little bit. As you can see on the Asia Pacific benchmark, we are now flat. U.S. futures are building on gains, now up 6, 7 tenths of 1%. Most of these markets that are coming online right now are starting to turn positive. You have the Kospi index up 6 tenths of 1%. Taiwan is just coming online, 1.3% to the upside there. Dollar yen, you see on your screens as well, 150 handle there. As far as that is concerned. Now, other breaking news, of course, to tell you about later on, including the RBNZ, of course, Adrian Orr stepping down. Golden Dragon Index up overnight, 2%. A50 futures are signaling a decently strong rally going into the open today. You are looking at live pictures right now. Chinese President Xi Jinping, as you can see on your screens, Premier Li Qiang will be about to give, of course, that work report in a couple of minutes. Very quickly, just a glance at some of these markets, too. I can just tell you about them as well. Bond futures are also coming online, maybe in reaction as well to some hefty numbers on the fiscal front. Let's take it straight now, in fact, to Beijing. And Stephen Engel, our chief North Asia correspondent, is standing by outside the Great Hall of the People. Steve.
Yeah, so the pomp and circumstances beginning right now inside the building I'm standing in front of. We got the major numbers already out pre-work report, and he's going to, Li Qiang, the premier, is going to flesh out some of these numbers. A fairly ambitious growth target of around 5% for this year, which would be the same as last year. But the external environment obviously much more challenging, or poses potential more challenges, obviously, given the tariff of 20% from the United States, and then the retaliatory tariffs that we've heard from the Ministry of Commerce as well. And again, we don't know how far this might escalate. But again, we've been waiting for those fiscal numbers, and they have come through, essentially meeting many economists' expectations of lifting the fiscal budget deficit target to GDP to 4% from 3%. That's quite a large jump, the highest level in 3 decades, since 1994. So they clearly have given lawmakers that mandate to increase fiscal spending. They've also essentially taking on much more burden with sovereign bond issuances, taking away the burden on the local governments, which were strained, the coffers were strained considerably during COVID-0 and the expenses there. So we're seeing 4.4 trillion yuan of new special local government bonds, also 1.3 trillion yuan of ultra-long special sovereign bonds, also another 500 billion yuan of new special sovereign bonds for the big banks. So we're getting the fiscal outlays, we're getting a growth target, which is going to be pretty ambitious given the situation in the local economy and the external environment, and also a 7.2% increase in defense spending, the same as last year.
Steve, we don't normally get a lot of concrete details in the forthcoming work report, but just tell us, what are the highlights that we're really looking for here, and any shifts in tone that we should be keeping an eye out?
Yeah, I think the numbers on the fiscal outlays sets the tone. Now it's just the devil will be in the details as well. And just about, what are the marching orders to the provinces to deliver that hefty growth target against the backdrop of the external pressure. And again, any mention of a protectionist sentiment abroad, a tariff retaliation, any mention of Trump, which I do not expect, other than what they often say is the external environment will be continuously challenging. Any kind of tone, obviously, in defense spending outlays, modernization of the military, which has been an ongoing drive, as well as the anti-corruption drive throughout the ranks of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. Any kind of tone that they're going to be doubling down on that would be interesting, as well as whether, while they outlay fiscal spending, whether there's going to be further belt tightening elsewhere. That's what I want to hear.
There we go. Stephen Engel, our man on the ground there, our chief North Asia correspondent outside, of course, that building, where we'll take you now straight inside that building, where, as you can see right now, of course, it's a jam-packed room, and the Chinese Premier Li Qiang is about to deliver his annual work report. Let us listen in. Good morning.
The State Council, I will now report to you on the work of the government for your deliberation, and also for comments from members of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. First, review of our work in 2024. The year 2024 was a truly remarkable year in China's development journey. At its third plenary session, the 20th Central Committee of the CPC set forth plans for future deepening reform comprehensively to advance Chinese modernization. We celebrated the 75th anniversary of the founding of PRC, greatly inspiring patriotism and dedication in the Chinese people of all ethnic groups. Over the past year, in the face of complex and challenging developments marked by mounting external pressures and growing domestic difficulties, we, the Chinese people of all ethnic groups, have overcome difficulties and continued to forge ahead under the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core. We ensured overall stable performance and steady growth of the economy and accomplished the main goals and tasks. In 2024, in terms of economic and social development, solid headway was made in pursuing high-quality growth and fostering new quality productive forces. China's economic strength, scientific and technological capabilities, and composite national strengths continued to rise, and solid new strides were made in advancing Chinese modernization. Stable performance was consolidated and sustained. Steady expansion of the economy. China's GDP rose to 134.9 trillion yuan, a year-on-year increase of 5%. In terms of job opportunities and the CPI there, overall steady. 12.56 million new jobs were added in the urban areas, and the surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas averaged 5.1%. CPI rose up by 0.2%. A basic equilibrium in the balance of payments. Foreign trade reached a record high, and global market share of China's exports increased steadily. Foreign exchange reserves surpassed $3.2 trillion. Steady progress in ensuring the people's well-being. Per capita disposable income grew by 5.1% in real terms. Achievements were made in poverty alleviation. Greater support was provided to ensure the social stability. New advancements were made in a solid way. New advancements in industrial upgrading. Grain output hit a new high of 700 million metric tons. The new energy vehicles has passed the 13 million mark. Innovative capacity was further enhanced. Chang'e Number 6 mission completed humanity's first-ever sample collection from the far side of the moon, and Mengxiang ocean drilling vessel was delivered and commissioned. New improvements were made in the ecological environment. In cities at and above prefecture level, the average concentration of PM 2.5 fell by 2.7%. Energy consumption per unit of GDP dropped by more than 3%. new breakthroughs in reform and opening up. We implemented the reform plans of institutional reform by developing the national market and postponing the retirement age and other major reform measures. In manufacturing sector, foreign investment access restrictions were cancelled and lifted. Trade and investment cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative was steadily expanded and upgraded.
Our achievement in 2024 did not come easily. The adverse impacts of changes in the international environment increased, and some deep-seated structural problems that had been building up in the country for years came to a head. Sluggish domestic demand was compounded by weak public expectations along with other issues, and the difficulty in sustaining stable economic growth has increased. However, we responded to this array of difficulties with both active and effective steps. We doubled the policies to improve macro regulations in a timely manner. In particular, we took actions that was decided by the Political Bureau of the Central Committee at the meeting on September 26. During this process, we deepened our understanding of the laws governing economic work and became more keenly aware that the centralized, unified leadership of the Party Central Committee is essential to doing our economic work well. It is also clear that we must properly handle the relationship between an efficient market and a well-functioning government, between aggregate supply and demand, between fostering new growth drivers and upgrading old ones, between optimizing allocation of new resources and making the best use of existing ones, and between enhancing quality and expanding total output. What we have achieved once again proves that under the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, and with the dedicated efforts of our people across the country, we can prevail over any difficulty in pursuing development. Over the past year, we continued to deepen our understanding of and apply Xi Jinping's thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, firmly held the authority of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core and its centralized unified leadership, followed party leadership in every aspect and throughout the process of government work, and we have many engaged in the following work. First, we took more robust and innovative measures in conducting macro regulations in light of evolving conditions and promoted economic recovery and growth. We have strengthened counter-cyclical macro controls and introduced targeted measures, and China's economy saw a trend of a V-shape throughout the year, and we have made strong push to implement fiscal and monetary policies, and we have lowered the required reserve ratio and policy interest rate twice. And we also expanded the 2 new projects, and we increased the support for stabilization of the housing market, and we also lowered the down payments for home buyers. Efforts were made to repurchase loan projects, and we have also expanded the swap of 6 trillion yuan worth of local government debt quota. Second, we deepened reform and opening up comprehensively with unswerving commitment and boosted international and internal momentum of development. We overhauled regulations impeding the development of a unified national market. We deepened the reform of SOEs and continued to optimize the development environment of private sector, also cultivated new growth points of foreign trade. Foreign trade is now exerting a greater contribution to economic growth, and we have strengthened opening up for all the countries with diplomatic relations with China. If they are a least developed countries, and they will be entitled to zero tariffs if they trade with China. We also extended the visa-free transit stays to more countries. And third, we made major efforts to promote innovation-driven development and upgraded the industrial structure. We boosted China's strength in science and technology, rolled out major national science-tech programs across the board, and improved the technology in industry. And we have Beidou navigation satellite system, commercial space, and the new type of energy storage. The value added of the core industries of the digital economy rose to about 10% of GDP. Four, we advanced coordinated development between urban and rural areas and between different regions and improved the economic layout. The urbanization rate climbed to 67%. We continued our efforts to consolidate the foundations of agriculture and made important headways in rural revitalization. A number of regional development policies and policies for integrated development were rolled out. Fifth, we actively developed social programs and improved the people's well-being. College graduates and people out of poverty and the migrant workers, among other key population groups, have had a stable situation of employment. The scholarship program has been expanded. The student loan has lowered its interest, benefiting 34 million students. We also advanced mutual recognition of clinical test results from different medical institutions, and also the basic pension standard have been increased. A lump sum livelihood subsidy has been issued, benefiting over 11 million people. The cultural market is boosted. Our athletes won the best results in Olympic Games in Paris. Six, we continued to strengthen environmental protection and promoted green and low-carbon development. The discharge of major pollutants has continued the trend of decrease. We also pushed ahead, reducing the pollution in areas of deserts and sandy lakes. And the share of electricity generated from non-fossil fuels increased, accounting for close to 40% of the total power generation. And we also launched the National Voluntary Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Trading Market. 7, we enhanced the government performance and government innovation and ensured social stability and harmony. We implemented the Party Central Committee's strategic plans for conducting full and rigorous party self-governance, strictly complied with the Central Party leadership's 8-point decision on improving discipline. We reduced the burden to the grassroots and enhanced our efforts in fighting against corruption. We also submitted 19 legislative proposals to the Standing Committee of the NPC and revised 28 administrative regulations. We readily accepted oversight in compliance with the law and handled with keen attention recommendations from NPC deputies and proposals from the CPPCC. We wrote out 2 lists of major matters covered by one-step government service, strengthened emergency management and seed production, and fight against criminal activities so as to ensure prosperity and social stability. In 2024, we made new advances in conducting major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. President Xi Jinping and other party and state leaders visited numerous countries and attended the Astana Summit of Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS Summit and APEC Economic Leaders Summit. China also successfully held the Beijing Summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, among other major diplomatic events. We promoted the building of a community with a shared future for mankind and consolidated partnership across the globe. China made important contributions to peace and development in the world. We owe our achievements in 2024 to General Secretary Xi Jinping, who is at the helm charting the course, and to the sound guidance of Xi Jinping's thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. We also owe them to the strong leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi at its core, and to the concerted efforts of the whole party, the armed forces, and the Chinese people of all ethnic groups.
On behalf of the State Council, I express sincere thanks to all our people and to all other political parties, people's organizations, and public figures from all sectors of society. I express heartfelt appreciation to our fellow countrymen and women in the Hong Kong and Macau special administrative regions, in Taiwan and overseas. I also express sincere thanks to the governments of other countries, international organizations, and friends across the world that have shown understanding and support for us in China as we pursue modernization. We are keenly aware of the problems and challenges that confront us. International, an increasingly complex and severe external environment may exert a greater impact on China in areas such as trade and science and technology. Unilateralism and protectionism are on the rise. Multilateral trading system is experiencing disruptions, and the basis for our economic pickup is unstable. Effective demand is insufficient. Some enterprises have difficulties in production and operation. The employment and revenue increase are under pressure. Some basic level fiscal budget is in difficulties. Some cages have misconduct or have no actions. In some places and localities, corruption is frequent. So we must confront those difficulties and problems and at the same time cement our confidence in development. China has its distinctive system advantage with large-sized market and complete industrial system and rich personnel and talent resources and other edges. And the basic trend of long-term economic pickup will remain unchanged. And the giant ship of China's economy will continue to cleave the waves and sail steadily toward the future. Second, overall requirements and policy orientations for economic and social development in 2025. The year 2025 is the final year for implementing the 14th Five-Year Plan. To deliver, we in government must, under the strong leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, do the following. Follow the guidance of Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. Fully implement the guiding principles from the 20th National Congress and the second and third plenary sessions of the 20th Party Central Committee. Adhere to the general principle of pursuing progress while ensuring stability. Fully and faithfully apply the new development philosophy on all fronts. Move faster to create a new pattern of development and make solid progress in high-quality development. For the deeper reform, comprehensively and expand high standard opening up, modernize the industrial system, better ensure both development and security, implement more proactive and effective macro policies, boost domestic demand, promote integrated advancements in technological and industrial innovation, ensure stability in the real estate market and the stock market, guard against and diffuse risks in key areas and external shocks, stabilize expectations and boost economic vitality, promote sustained economic recovery and growth, keep improving people's living standards, maintain social harmony and stability, fulfill the targets and tasks set in the 14th Five-Year Plan to a high standard. These efforts will enable us to lay a solid foundation for a good start to the 15th Five-Year Plan. The main targets for development this year are as follows: GDP growth of around 5%, surveyed urban unemployment rate of around 5.5%, over 12 million new urban jobs, CPI increase of around 2%, growth in personal income in step with economic growth, a basic equilibrium in the balance of payments, grain output of around 1.4 trillion jing, a drop of around 3% in energy consumption per capita GDP, continued improvements in the environment. The target of GDP growth of 5% fully takes into account the need to stabilize employment, prevent risks, and improve people's well-being, as well as the potential for growth and conditions supporting growth. So, it underscores our resolve to meet difficulties head-on and strive hard to deliver. We will make progress in a steady way and innovate while maintaining the achievements. We will improve the toolkits of our policies and make dynamic readjustment in our policies in response to the conditions so that our macro control would be more far-sighted, targeted, and effective. We will implement more proactive fiscal policies. This year, the deficit rate is designed to be 4%, 1 percentage point higher than last year. The deficit size is 5.66 trillion RMB yuan, 1.6 trillion more than last year. And we will also issue the long-term special bond, 1.3 trillion RMB yuan. We designed to have 4.4 trillion RMB yuan of local government dedicated bond. This year, the total newly added government debt will stay at 11.86 trillion yuan, 2.9 trillion yuan more than last year. We must accelerate the allotment of different kinds of budget so as to support the actual expenditure. We will keep optimizing the expenditure structure. The government will be frugal so that more funds will be allocated for people's well-being. And to meet people's need, we will take moderately loose monetary policy. At a proper time, we will reduce the interest rate and reserve rate to ensure sufficient liquidity. The money supply increase will be aligned with our economic growth target and the price index. We will optimize and innovate the structural monetary policies and more aggressively support the sound development of the real estate and stock markets. We will smooth away the monetary policy channels so as to further reduce the cost of social financing. We must be people-centered. in our macro policies. So more economic policies will focus on benefiting the people and boosting consumption. More resources will be invested on people's benefits and people's livelihood in order to have a virtuous cycle of economic growth and livelihood improvement. We must better utilize the policy mix. We will set up an evaluation work mechanism of our macro policies to improve the matching of the policy goals, tools, time points, and strengths and paces. We will coordinate the policy implementation and expectation management. To fulfill the targets of this year, we must implement comprehensively Xi Jinping's thoughts on our economy and give top priority to high-quality growth. And we will consistently expand domestic demand and have the supply-side structural reform. With the reform, we will mobilize the initiatives of all sides.
3. Key government tasks in 2025. First, vigorously boost domestic consumption and increase the efficacy of investments and comprehensively expand domestic demand. And we will practice the special initiatives to boost consumption and optimize consumption environment and unleash multifaceted and diversified potential of consumption and promote consumption upgrading. We will also issue an ultra-long special treasury bond totaling 300 billion yuan to support consumer goods trading program. And we also create a full range of new consumption scenarios to advance the growth of digital, green, smart, and other types of consumption. And we will also introduce measures to unleash the consumption potential in culture and sports-related industry so as to create a safe and reassuring environment for consumption. Efforts will be made to expand effective investment. We will better leverage the investment toolbox of government at different levels and select key projects and make the most use of our funding support and fight against ineffective investments. This year, 335 billion yuan will be earmarked in the central government budget for investment. We will put ultra-long special treasury bond to good use to support top-down organization and coordination to ensure great support for the major national strategies. We will support investment from the private sector so as to create even greater space for private capital to develop new quality productive forces and accelerate the development of a modernized industrial system. We will foster emerging industries and industries for the future. Strategic emerging industries will be better integrated. New technology, new products, and new scenarios will be applied across the board. Biomanufacturing, quantum technology, embodied AI, and 6G technology will be further cultivated. We will promote orderly industrial development and healthy competition and foster a number of competitive enterprises so that they can trailblaze in new fields and new tracks. We will also support the transformation of traditional industries. Efforts will be made to advance industrial foundation, re-engineering and major technology and equipment research. Efforts will be made to optimize the transformation of traditional industry. We will foster some popular brands, quality products, and renowned traditional industries. We will unleash the creativity of the digital economy. The AI Plus initiative will be further advanced. We will develop smart IoT and new energy-based vehicles, computers, and 5G, and the next generation of smart terminals. 5G technology will be applied in large scale. The innovation-driven developments will be accelerated, and we will also standardize the development of platform economy. 3. Implement the strategy of invigorating China through science and technology and boost the overall performance of China's innovation system. We will build a high-quality education system. The 3-year action plan for strengthening education will be drawn up and implemented. The standard system will be rolled out for compulsory education and expand the offering of higher education services and roll out free-of-charge preschool education. We will also strengthen the construction of double first standard universities. Efforts will also be made to enhance the morality of teachers and to deepen the reform of education. We will accelerate the pace of transformation from a big country in education into a strong education power. We will improve self-reliance and strength in science and technology. Efforts will be made to plan some major science innovation and breakthroughs. And we will support the reform and institutional restructuring of scientific research institutions. From a system perspective, we will ensure that enterprises can get involved in major national scientific programs. Efforts will be made to facilitate commercialization of technologies and boost popular science initiatives. We will publicize and spread the spirits of scientific practitioners and build an environment that empowers innovation. We will enhance the overall caliber of talents, and efforts will be made to cultivate the talents pool, and we will be bold enough to allow young talents to play a bigger role. The talents certification system will be rolled out to incentivize the vast amount of talents. 4. Accelerate the implementation of landmark reform measures and better leverage the leading role of economic structural reform. We'll make effective moves to stimulate the vitality of market entities, and we will remain unswervingly committed to promoting SOEs and the private sector. We remain deeply committed to rolling out a number of policies to support the private sector, and wage arrears will be resolved. Special activity will be taken to enhance the enforcement of law, and the government will follow the approach of service so as to bring warmth to enterprises. And we will also make thorough efforts to develop a unified national market. Efforts will be made to fight against rat race competition, and we will implement a negative list so as to improve the access for new forms of business and new sectors. Policies will be introduced to improve the social credit system and develop an integrated credit repair system. We will also work faster to develop a unified and open transportation market and launch an initiative to cut logistic costs across society. Reforms will be conducted in the fiscal, taxation, and financial systems. Faster moves will be taken to collect excise tax on some items further down the production to consumption chain, with the power of collection being passed to local governments. The capital market investment and financing activities will be refined, and we will also improve the standards and foundational institutions for technology finance and green finance. 5. Expand higher standard opening up and stabilize foreign trade and investment. We will work for stable development of foreign trade and optimize the financial services involving investment, financing, settlement, and foreign exchanges, and expand the scale and coverage of export credit insurance and provide support to enterprises in cross-border e-commerce. We will support the integrated development of domestic and foreign trade and work faster to address unified development of both domestic trade and international trade. And we will cultivate new growth drivers such as digital trade and green trade, among others. We will vigorously encourage foreign investment. Efforts will be made to deepen the openness of the service sector and other open sectors such as telecommunications, medical services, and education. We will ensure national treatment for foreign-funded enterprises in fields such as production factors. Efforts will be made to build a market-based, legal, and standard business environment so as to facilitate the development of foreign-funded enterprises.
Promote solid and steady progress in high-quality development of BRI initiative. We coordinate to facilitate some small but beautiful livelihood improvement projects. In terms of legal, financial, and logistic services, we will encourage comprehensive services overseas to optimize the international cooperation landscape in the industrial chain and supply chain. Deepen bilateral and multilateral and regional economic cooperation. We will continuously expand the free trade network globally, and we will safeguard the multilateral trade mechanism with the WTO as its core so as to further expand the convergence of interests for common development. 6. Effectively preventing and diffusing risks in key areas and ensuring that no systemic risks arise. We will make continued efforts to stem the downturn and restore stability in the real estate market. We will increase the land supply for real estate markets, revitalize the reserved land and commercial houses. We will prevent any default risk in the real estate developers. We will effectively and orderly establish relevant institutional designs to speed up the new model design for the real estate market. We will try to build safe, comfortable, green, and intelligent houses. Take steady measures to diffuse local government debt risks. We will improve and implement the whole basket debt diffusion plan, optimize the performance evaluation and control measures to readjust the highly risky areas with high debt. We will also try to curb any...
Okay, we're going to leave that for now, but Bloomberg subscribers can continue watching at Live Go. And later today, you can also catch President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress in Washington. Turning quickly to markets now, Dave.
Yeah, very positive start to the session right now, 12 minutes into, and we are looking at virtually every single stock on the major benchmarks in Hong Kong, just to caveat that as well, are seeing some upside. Right now, led by tech, led by consumption. As you can see, tech is up 3%. The Hang Seng China Index is up 2.5%. So in terms of market breadth, we're there, we're positive. Volumes are also starting to pick up, and we're also getting a lot of early signs that strong inflows across the Stock Connect back into Hong Kong. So mainland buyers are buying into this rally.
Yeah, and this critical shift, number one major task of 2025, boosting consumption. Last year, it was new quality productive forces. Now, this is the big shift, a big structural shift that, many people for decades have been wanting China to make.
Absolutely. And just to Rebecca's point, just to add to that too, right? So it's not just directly targeting and boosting consumption, right? They are unlocking the various parts of the bureaucracy to be able to then help boost the consumption story. We can talk about all the details now. In fact, let's bring in Wang, head of Asia Economics and chief China economist at UBS Investment Bank, joining us right now for her initial reaction to this. Wang, we are about 45 minutes into the Premier's work report speech. What stands out to you so far?
Well, I think what stands out, as you mentioned, I think this report definitely emphasizes the importance of boosting domestic demand, especially domestic consumption. And that's against this backdrop of higher tariffs just coming through. I think the focus is boosting domestic demand. That's very clear. And also the fiscal expansion that, 4% of budget deficit, that's a record, at least nominal sort of official budget deficit. That's a record that's higher than during COVID period that was announced. So I think that the authorities certainly are quite determined to stabilize growth. And the third thing is the emphasis on innovation, on technology. I think the market is reflecting that. I think this is on the back of DeepSeek and President Xi's meeting with private entrepreneurs recently. So I think these a few things are clear. A bit of a difference from the past.
Wang Tao, before we get into sort of some of the nuts and bolts of this, I want to ask, take a step back. What is the message that policymakers Beijing is sending to the world about how China is going to deal with a trade war and increasing competition with the US? And is President Xi Jinping projecting a message of confidence here?
I think, against this external shock that's coming and that's a bit destabilizing for the world economy, I think China's emphasis, one is China wants to continue to be integrated into the world system and wants to keep open and open further, wants to build better relations and trade linkage with the rest of the world. And also, I think, keep the doors open with talks with the U.S. as well. And China is not hitting back, exactly proportionally to the U.S., opening trade, opening investment. So that's one. Two is that China is going to focus on developing its own economy, as I mentioned, boosting domestic demand. The third, I think, is about risk control that includes, for example, resilience of the supply chain, so the emphasis on building own technology and developing the own market.
Wang Tao, on the special bond issuance here, this incremental fiscal push, let's put it that way, a lot of big numbers. I'm just going to mention some for our viewers here. 1.3 trillion yuan ultra-long special treasury bonds. You have $500 million in special treasury bonds to support some of the large state commercial banks. And then there's a separate larger number there as it pertains to local government. We'd love for you to be able to contextualize those numbers for us, given where market expectations were going into this work report.
Right. I think these numbers are largely in line with expectation. Actually, the special treasuries are a little bit below our expectation. We had been expecting 2 trillion RMB special treasury, excluding the bank recap. The bank recap was already announced some time ago, and we thought it was going to be at least 500 billion, but could be 1 trillion, but it's going to be done over time. This is to beef up the banking system, to solidify them. They don't necessarily need the money now. The 1.3 trillion, we expect 2 trillion, those are extra spending money, if you will. That's going to help with infrastructure spending, that local governments have some financing gap because of the lower land sales, lower revenue, and so on. So the central government funding is going to help with the key project, as well as with the consumer support, right? The trade-in program that was about 150 billion they budgeted last year. This year they doubled that, and that's very in line with our expectation. We expect it to double, so 300 billion that expanded to beyond automobiles and appliances to include smartphones and smaller items as well. So that's a clear boost. And then the deficit of 4%, last year 3%, and that's also, I think, helping to bridge the funding gap for local governments so they can pay, general operations, wages and salaries, and also arrears owing to corporate. So that's a good news for corporate that has been waiting to get paid.
Wang Tao, I want to ask for a little bit more context on some of those stimulus numbers when it comes to the US trade war. Can China still achieve a 5% target if we see 40, 50, 60% tariffs from the US? At what point do US tariffs really start to bite when it comes to this around 5% GDP target?
Right. I think as U.S. tariff increases, especially if it's focusing on broad based, Chinese exports, I think it will be increasingly challenging. I think the extra 20% that we just saw, 10 plus 10, plus the original tariff, puts the effective tariff on Chinese exports already close to 40%. It's very high. It will start to hurt. I think the authorities, as they see the impact of higher tariffs, they may roll out additional measures, additional stimulus to the domestic economy later on. Right now, I think there's still quite a lot of uncertainty to the U.S. tariffs and the impact. So the NPC meeting, the work report, have demonstrated what has been in plan. But later in the year, for example, this summer at the next Politburo meeting in July, or later, if the impact seemed to be bigger and tariffs are higher, I think China could have come out with additional measures to try to meet its growth target.
On that notion that they will adjust course or adjust as necessary, they did keep rather vague on the timing of future, say, reductions in interest rates or the triple R cut. I want to ask you just broadly, how much scope does China have both on the fiscal, given the numbers we have, and monetary, given what they've done on triple R and some of these interest rates? How much scope does China have to further stimulate its economy if the need arises?
Right. On the fiscal side, I think, nominally, if you just look at China's debt and the deficit seems already very large, but China's government does have assets. And also China has very high domestic savings rate. So from the financing perspective, I think China still have quite a bit of fiscal space. So if needed, it can certainly increase the fiscal deficit. At the moment, this year, we estimate from, all these big numbers that's announced, we think the augmented broad fiscal deficit expanded is going to expand by probably 1.5% to 2% of GDP. They can certainly add another 2%, in my view, in the short term, in a very unusual time. On the monetary side, I think at the moment there is a bit of resistance to cut rates, mainly because the Fed, of course, and also the U.S. Dollar is strong. The U.S. Inflation has been a bit more stubborn, but we are looking for 30 to 40 basis point of rate cut later in the year, and probably another 20 to 30 next year if the tariffs continue and so on. So I think there's some space that would lower mortgage rates, that would lower the cost of debt service burden at local government, at corporate level.
Wang Tao, the number one major task for 2025 is boosting consumption. That contrasts with last year, which was all about modernizing industrialization, new productive forces. How do we understand this shift? Is this a short-term priority for 2025, or are we seeing a more structural shift in Beijing's mindset when it comes to consumption?
Well, I think there is a recognition that so when the shift happens, it doesn't mean China is not focusing on new productive forces. It is still. But I think it's recognizing that at the moment, China's sort of in this cycle, in this period, the main obstacle to growth is actually realizing China's potential is the lack of demand, especially lack of domestic consumption. So the extra emphasis on boosting domestic consumption. I would like to say that this could be a shift, a structural shift in the long run, and it's necessary. I don't know if it will be, but I hope it is, because I think China's issue is in many sectors, their overcapacity. External market is going to be quite challenging going forward. So China has to rely on boosting its own domestic demand. So corporate don't need to cut prices anymore, and they can make money. So China's production is very competitive, very productive, but China needs to absorb more of that production. And also, of course, as Chinese citizens will be happy if they can, have the ability and confidence to consume more. So over the longer term, I think this is a is a good direction to go. And so increasing the trade-in program, of course, helps in the short term. But I think more importantly, the things emphasized by the work report, including social security system, employment, labor training, employment protection, and boosting growth of the private sector, especially in the services area, more access to private sector in the domestic unified market, and so on. That's all going to boost income, employment, and confidence, and therefore consumption.
It's going to take time. We keep hearing that, Wang Tao. This is structural. It will take time for a lot of the things that we've heard, not just today, but in the past several months, to work themselves through the system, down the bureaucracy, through local governments, and into the ground, and into consumers. Let me ask you, this 5% growth target, is there upside or downside risk to that number? What I'm also trying to ask you as well, if you could address this, is when do the numbers start to reflect everything that's announced today?
Right. I think at this moment, the 5% growth target, I see that as more downside risk, mainly because I think the tariffs are coming in and early, and there could be additional measures as well. Other countries may impose tariff under the pressure of the U.S., so I think this is a big challenge. Domestically, we talked about boosting consumption, but I think I also wanted to emphasize stabilizing the property market is key, because Chinese household has a huge amount of asset allocated to property. And so if that can stabilize, that can really support confidence. And it's notable, the work report talked about give local governments more sort of autonomy in deciding the parameters about destocking, and that's very important. We have to see, how that happens. So I think at this point is a bit of a downside. We won't see the impact of the tariffs and of the policies until at least a couple more months, maybe May, when we see March, April numbers, then we will see whether some of this is how effective or how big an impact and how effective the policy has been. So that's why we think that if there's additional policy, it will come probably later in the summer.
Okay, Wang Tao, thank you so much for joining us live and sharing your live insights too to that work report. That's the head of Asia Economics and chief China economist at UBS Investment Bank. And you can also turn to your Bloomberg for more on the MPC. Go to TLive Go to get commentary and analysis from Bloomberg's expert editors. Dave.
Yeah, certainly some very critical context and size, scope, and scale, really, and everything you need to understand when you look at the extremely large numbers and how it really, I guess, permeates and affects the common consumer, for example, right? So we talk about these trillions, and I think that there is this time gap between what's announced today and when the numbers, as Wang Tao was mentioning, they start to respond. But markets are already starting to look at this as a very positive work report.
Yeah, and this really interesting shift, right, from new productive forces, industrial modernization to consumption. Interesting, Wang Tao saying, I hope so, when it comes to whether or not this shift to consumption is a long-term structural shift. That's going to be the question now, I think, for many economists.
Absolutely. So we will keep on top of the story. As we were pointing out, markets, to be more specific, equity markets in Hong Kong are holding near the highs of the session so far. Granted, we're only 30 minutes into the cash market session. Yields are on the 10-year yield, at least 176 right now is the 10-year China Treasury. That's a look across the curve as well, slightly flatter. And as you can see there, if you just simply do the simple math, FX markets very, very quickly here. Dollar China did react to the upside here on the back of some dollar strength, which has come through not just as far as the Chinese currency is concerned, but of course many, many other things, including, of course, the tariff relief that markets are starting to digest. But it's a very fluid story.
Well, absolutely. And we just have to think about this ambitious 5% target. I mean, just how ambitious is it? 20% tariffs has seemed to have been priced in by markets. You look at the currency, you see that lack of volatility. But what if we see it go up to 30, 40, even that 60 number?
Well, the consumption part, to your point, is critical there, because the 5% that we hit effectively last year was because of the net exports coming in as well. Right. So that's it from us here on the China Show for now. For our Bloomberg clients, of course, we want want to follow more on the China story, you can turn to your terminals for this. We will turn it over now to Bloomberg's Balance of Power Special Edition. There is also an equally critical event taking place across the Pacific. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.